the black raspberries are forming all the way down the cane.
In addition to the fruits being absolutely delicious, this plant could even make you a little bit of money.
Guten Gardening, everybody. Now, here at Guten Gardening, we love our raspberry bushes. We have several different varieties that we've been growing here for the last 5 or 6 years. And each year we have a wonderful problem that we have to deal with. And there aren't very many problems that I would say are wonderful, but one of the things that you have to learn about raspberries is how to control the spread. Now, I say that this is a wonderful problem to have because if you like raspberries and you have just a little bit of patience, you can take one plant and spread that out as much as you want to, so you can increase your harvests exponentially in just a couple of years.
However, it is important to note that from a singular plant, if you're not careful, you can have all of your beds taken over
because of the ways in which they spread. And raspberry plants spread typically in one of 3 different ways. Now, perhaps the most obvious way that raspberries are going to spread involve the berry themselves, because when they fall and hit the ground, they can reseed themselves, or when birds come or other insects come and take some of those berries and then carry them elsewhere in any number of forms, those can then create the seed that then spreads somewhere else.
But in addition to that, if you allow the ends of the canes of raspberries to come down and come into contact with the ground, and you can see a perfect example of that right here. This is an old cane that was able to touch the ground. Roots will form and you'll see the beginnings of a new plant. And actually, these beautiful black raspberry bushes here came from that exact practice.
We took a few of the canes from this black raspberry bush, allowed them to grow over into this bed and touch the ground, and now we have 3 really healthy brand new plants. Now, actually for us, that spreading is all well and good because that's what we wanted. We wanted to expand the amount of raspberries, and it's not going to be the case for everybody necessarily, especially if you don't have a lot of extra room. But an easy way to avoid that kind of spread where the cane touches the ground is to create a kind of trellising support to keep canes up off the ground, because if they don't touch the ground, they're not going to create or form those roots. So you see that trellising that I have behind me is very simple, just a little bit of fencing, and then we interweave the canes as they come and as they start to grow so that they're not hitting the ground. If we want them to, we can allow them to, but we don't want that additional spread here. Now, the third way in which they commonly spread, and this is our heritage red raspberry behind us, is actually a way in which, 1, we do need to control to keep it from spreading everywhere, but 2, we can make a little bit of money that can go back into our garden with these plants.
So first, let's talk about how our heritage red raspberry spreads its plants all the way over here. You can see that there aren't any canes that are reaching over or coming down and touching the ground.
In fact, the heritage red raspberry grows quite differently from our black raspberry.
The canes definitely grow in a more upright position. They're not as long as the vines. You can actually see the difference here. You see how this black raspberry has these really long, thin vines that trail out, we're good 12 feet from the plant. Here, with our heritage red raspberry, these are stockier. They're not as tall, and actually we've cut off the ends of these because of how this grows. If you want to know the difference between the everbearing raspberry and the summer-bearing raspberry in terms of how they grow and how they produce fruit,
we have a couple of really good instructional videos about those raspberries, including care, how to prune them, etc., and we'll link those in the description.
But the way this heritage red raspberry spreads is underground. It sends out lateral roots that go a really long way away from the plant, and as it goes out laterally, it starts to send up shoots vertically, and that is the creation of all of these plants. So all of these are stemming from the roots of this same main plant.
So this is why I say if you have a little bit of patience, you can actually really expand out from 1 or even 2 plants into a much bigger area, regardless of the type of raspberry plant that you're trying to grow. The thing is, most people don't want those raspberries to take over everything because we've got a lot of other fruits and vegetables, etc., that we want to grow and harvest. And if we just let them spread, well, there'll be a lot of berries, but not a lot of any of the other plants that we need. So here's how you can take your raspberry plants and make a little bit of extra profit. Again, in our case, we use that profit to go right back into the garden.
For our summer-bearing raspberries, it's as simple as directing a cane downward, but instead of directing it all the way to the ground, we can have a pot directly under it. Stick the end of the cane into this pot, and that will start a new plant, but in a pot that we can then snip off.
And that is truly a new plant that we can then sell for a few dollars to somebody who would like a black summer-bearing raspberry. But for these fall-bearing raspberries, the process takes even less time because we've already got these new plants, and all we have to do, I want to come in here and I want to dig as deep as I can with a spade, typically, and get all the way underneath here and detach this plant with as much root intact as possible, and I'm going to transplant that into one of our pots. Now, something to note about this, just like any other plant, when you transplant, when you remove it from the soil and detach it from the rest of the root system, that causes a good bit of stress. You want to move those in container out of the sun as quickly as possible and keep them nice and damp and watered until they have time to recover. And they probably won't look very great at first.
So don't be surprised with the drooping that you're going to get early on. And they might not all recover, but after a couple of days, you should start to see the health and the life return and revive. And this is a heritage red raspberry plant that is ready to go. Now, we usually sell these for about $5 each plant, but these are some of the plants that we didn't sell yet last year. These sat out in our Zone 5 Wisconsin winter all winter long, and then just like everything else, when it all started to come back to life, so did these. And these are actually the flora canes, which means we're gonna see fruit. In fact, if I look right here on this one, you can see the buds right here, so we're gonna have some fruit on this one. And even the plants where the cane itself didn't come back at all, you look right down in here, you see the foundation of some more raspberry plants. The same for this one.
So there are a couple of things that I think are really nice about this. Even if we don't sell all of our raspberry plants each year, we can keep them year over year, because again, they're going to go through the same process. It's just they're not going to get that big because we have them in containers, in those smaller containers. But two, we're controlling the spread as we want, but we're not wasting those new plants that are coming off of there. And as I mentioned, we typically sell them for about $5 each. So it's not a lot of money for the raspberry plant itself, and it's a great way to spread information about raspberries to our community as well. We typically just list them online and say we have some raspberry plants for $5. And when somebody comes to pick them up, I talk to them, I get the chance to talk to them about care and maintenance for raspberries, the different varieties of raspberries. And in general, that helps us to further our mission to try to teach other people what we've learned as well here at Guten Gardening. So it's a way to make a little bit of extra money for us to put it back into the garden, and it's a way to share information about a plant that's an amazing addition to the garden.
Check this out, the black raspberries are forming all the way down the cane. We're gonna have a really nice harvest this year. I'm confident if all goes according to plan.
Well, folks, if you've been thinking about growing raspberries, or you've been afraid to try out raspberries because you've heard things about how far they spread, how difficult it is to control, I'm here to tell you that it's not really that challenging. And on top of that, they can actually be beneficial to you beyond just producing an amazing tasting berry. And I've got the proof right here. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's video and found it useful and informative. And if you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.